the rifle barrel pressed cold against Abigail Thornton's forehead. Behind her, 6 children held their breath in the darkness of a stranger's barn. The man's finger tightened on the trigger, his eyes dead as winter stone. "Please." Abby whispered, her voice barely human. "Shoot me if you must, but feed them first. They haven't eaten in 3 days." The youngest girl whimpered. The man's jaw clenched. And in that moment, 2 shattered souls stood at the edge of something neither expected. Welcome to a story of survival, redemption, and the family we choose. If this tale touches your heart, please subscribe and comment your city below. I want to see how far this journey travels. Now, let us begin. Josiah Blackwood had buried his heart 4 years ago right alongside his wife Ruth and their 2 children. He'd shoveled dirt over the small coffins with his own hands, felt something inside him turn to stone, and decided that was the end of feeling anything at all. The ranch didn't care about grief. Cattle needed feeding, fences needed mending. The Montana wind didn't stop howling just because a man wanted to lie down and die. So Josiah kept moving. Day after day, season after season. 4 years of silence, so thick it had become its own kind of company. He was 44 years old and felt ancient. The morning everything changed started like any other. Josiah rode out at dawn to check the north pasture, found 3 steers had wandered through a gap in the fence line, spent hours tracking them through rocky terrain. By the time he returned, the afternoon sun hung low and mean, casting long shadows across the yard. That's when he noticed the barn door. Open. Just a crack. But Josiah knew every inch of this property the way a man knows his own scars. That door had been latched when he'd left. He was certain. His hand moved to the rifle before conscious thought caught up. Old instincts from the war, from years when danger wore many faces. He approached slow boots silent on packed earth, every muscle coiled tight. Voices, small ones, coming from inside. "Hush, Tommy. Hush now." "But I'm hungry, Abby. My tummy hurts." "I know, sweetheart. I know. Just a little longer." Josiah's finger found the trigger. Squatters. Drifters using his barn for shelter. He'd heard of such things, desperate folks, taking what wasn't theirs, sometimes turning violent when cornered. He kicked the door wide. 6 children stared back at him from the hay-strewn floor. 6 pairs of eyes terrified hollow, too old for the faces that held them. And standing in front of them, arms spread wide like a shield made of bone and desperation, was a woman. Young, mid-20s maybe? Auburn hair falling loose from a braid that had given up days ago. A dress that had once been blue, now gray with road dust and torn at the hem. Bare feet bloodied and wrapped in rags. But her eyes green as spring grass and burning with something fiercer than fear. "Don't," she said, just that one word. "Please, don't." Josiah kept the rifle raised. "Who are you? What are you doing in my barn?" "My name is Abigail Thornton." Her voice shook, but she didn't move from her protective stance. "These children are in my care. We mean you no harm, sir. We just needed shelter for the night." "Shelter you didn't ask for. That's called trespassing." "Yes, sir. I know." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. We've been walking for 5 days. The children couldn't go any further. Your barn door was unlocked and you thought you'd help yourself to what wasn't yours. I thought I'd keep 6 children from dying in the cold." The words hung between them. Josiah's eyes swept over the group huddled behind her. A tall boy, maybe 12, with sandy hair and a jaw set hard as his own. A dark-haired girl, clutching a smaller girl against her side. A black-haired boy with mischief written all over him despite the fear. A little girl with a rag doll pressed to her chest. A red-haired boy, maybe 5, with tears tracking through the dirt on his cheeks. And the smallest a child with Asian features and dark hair, maybe 4 years old, pressed so tight against the older girl she seemed to be trying to disappear entirely. None of them spoke. None of them moved. "Where are their parents?" Josiah demanded. Something broke in the woman's face, just for a moment. Then She rebuilt it brick by brick. Dead, she said flatly. All of them. Different times, different ways. These children came off an orphan train that wrecked 2 weeks outside of Cedar Valley. The adults in charge didn't survive. Neither did half the children. The rifle wavered slightly. Orphan train. From New York. These 6 survived because they were thrown clear of the wreckage. Abigail's voice steadied, taking on a practiced quality, like she'd told this story too many times. My parents took them in. They had a homestead about 30 miles east of here. Had. My parents are dead too. Wagon accident 6 days ago. Wheel came off on the Ridge Road. She closed her eyes briefly. I was thrown clear. They weren't. Josiah stared at her. At the children. At the impossible weight of tragedy standing in his barn like it had every right to be there. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything, sir. Abigail's chin lifted. But it's the truth. And if you're going to shoot us for trespassing, I'd ask you to do it quick. The children have suffered enough. Behind her, the littlest boy, Tommy she'd called him, started crying again. Quiet, hiccuping sobs that spoke of exhaustion beyond what a 5-year-old should know. Abby, he whimpered. Abby, I'm so hungry. Something shifted in Josiah's chest. Something he'd thought long dead. When's the last time they ate? He heard himself ask. Abigail's composure cracked. Just a fraction. 3 days ago. We ran out of supplies. I've been giving them water from streams, but 3 days. He lowered the rifle. The older boy immediately stepped forward, positioning himself beside Abigail. We ain't charity cases, mister. We can work. All of us can work. Sam, Abigail said quietly. Not now. I mean it. The boy's voice held an edge of desperation wrapped in pride. We ain't asking for handouts, just a chance. We work hard, all of us. Josiah studied him, 12 years old maybe, with the eyes of someone who'd already learned that the world took more than it gave. He recognized that look, saw it in his own mirror every damn day. What's your name, boy? Samuel Whitmore. Sam. He gestured behind him. That's my sister Grace. Will, Lottie, Tommy, and Lily. We're the only family each other's got now. Except for her. Josiah nodded toward Abigail. Sam's jaw tightened. Miss Abby's been taking care of us since the wreck. Before that, her folks did. Good people. Best we ever had. His voice wavered slightly. They died trying to give us a real home. Josiah looked at Abigail again. Saw the purple shadows under her eyes, the way she swayed slightly on her feet, the fierce determination holding her upright through sheer will. The homestead, he said. Your parents' place. What happened to it? Sold, to pay their debts. Abigail's voice was hollow. The bank moved fast. We had 3 days to gather what we could carry and leave. And you've been walking since? We tried to find work in Cedar Valley first. No one would hire a woman with 6 children in tow. The hotel wouldn't rent to us either. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw the full weight of what she'd been carrying. The sheriff suggested the orphanage in Helena. Said he'd arrange transport if we couldn't care for the children properly. But you didn't go. No, sir. Her voice hardened. I made a promise to my mother as she died. I told her I'd keep these children together, keep them safe, find them a real home. She glanced back at the 6 small faces watching her. I intend to keep that promise. The little girl with the rag doll Lottie Sam had called her tugged on Abigail's torn skirt. Miss Abby is the man going to hurt us. Abigail knelt down, smoothing the child's tangled blonde hair with a gentleness that seemed impossible given the circumstances. No, sweetheart. No one's going to hurt you. How do you know? Abigail looked up at Josiah, and in her eyes he saw a question, a plea, and beneath it steel. Because I won't let them, she said simply. Josiah thought of Ruth, of how she'd looked at him with that same fierce protective love when Daniel was born, of how she'd stepped between their son and a rattlesnake, once armed with nothing but a shovel and maternal terror. She would have taken these children in without a second thought, would have already had them fed and bathed and tucked into warm beds, would have made room somehow, because that's who she was. And she would have been ashamed of him standing here with a rifle while children starved. "There's a pump around back," he said roughly. "Water's clean. You can wash up while I figure out what to do with you." Abigail's eyes widened. "You're not sending us away." "Didn't say that. Said you could wash up." He turned toward the house, then stopped. "The children, they can come inside. Kitchen's warm. I'll find something for them to eat." "Sir." "Name's Josiah. Josiah Blackwood." He didn't look back. "And I ain't decided anything yet, so don't thank me." He walked to the house, his boots heavy on the hard-packed earth, and tried to remember the last time he'd had visitors. 2 years ago, 3. The isolation had become so complete, he'd stopped counting. Inside the kitchen was exactly as Ruth had left it, neat, organized, waiting for hands that would never return. Josiah moved through the familiar space like a ghost, haunting his own home, pulling out bread cheese, the leftover stew from yesterday's supper. Through the window, he watched Abigail lead the children toward the pump. The older ones moved with wary efficiency. Sam keeping watch. Grace helping the smaller children. The dark-haired boy carrying Lily on his back when her legs gave out. They moved like they'd been running for a long time, like they'd learned that stopping meant danger. The door opened behind him. Josiah turned to find Sam standing on the threshold, shoulders squared, every inch of his young body prepared for rejection. "Miss Abby sent me to see if you needed help," the boy said. "She's getting the little ones cleaned up. She shouldn't be on her feet, looks ready to collapse." "Miss Abby don't collapse." Sam said it like a statement of fact. "She just keeps going, that's what she does." Josiah set a plate on the table. "Sit down, eat something." "I can wait till the others." "Wasn't asking. Sit." Sam sat. His hands trembled as he reached for the bread, and Josiah saw him force himself to eat slowly, deliberately, when every instinct probably screamed to devour it all at once. "You're the oldest," Josiah said. "Of the children." "Yes, sir." "How long you been looking out for them?" Sam chewed, swallowed. "Since the train wreck. Before that, it was just me and Grace. She's my real sister. The others—" He paused. "We met on the train. Didn't know each other before. But after the wreck, after we saw what happened to the rest," his young voice hardened, "we decided we were family. All of us. Nobody else was going to look out for us, so we'd look out for each other. And then the Thorntons took you in." "Miss Abby's folks." "Yes, sir." "They were—" Sam's composure wavered. "They were good people. Really good. Treated us like we mattered. Like we weren't just mouths to feed." He looked down at the bread in his hands. "First time anyone ever did that." Josiah thought of Daniel at 12, thought of the dreams he'd had for his son, teaching him to ride to rope to run this ranch someday. All of it turned to ash in a single week of fever. "The little one," he said. "Lily. She hasn't said a word. She doesn't talk much. Hasn't since the wreck." Sam's voice softened. "Doc in town said it's trauma. Said she might come out of it, might not. Grace takes care of her mostly. They've got some kind of understanding." The door opened again, and Abigail appeared with the rest of the children. They'd washed the worst of the road dust from their faces and hands, but nothing could hide the hunger hollowing out their cheeks or the exhaustion dragging at their small bodies. "Sit," Josiah ordered. "All of you. There's food." The children looked at Abigail, waiting for her nod of permission before they moved toward the table. Even starving, they waited. Even desperate, they deferred to her. She'd earned their trust, Josiah realized. Not just with words, but with actions, with sacrifice, with 5 days of walking on bleeding feet so they could eat what little food remained. "You too," he said to her. "Sit down before you fall down." "I'm fine." "You're lying." He pulled out a chair. "Sit." Abigail sat. Her hands shook as she reached for the bread, and Josiah saw her take only a small piece, leaving the larger portions for the children. "Eat more than that," he said. "I'm not hungry." "You're starving. You're just too stubborn to admit it." He pushed the plate closer. "Martyrdom doesn't feed anyone. Eat." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise maybe at being seen through so easily. She took another piece of bread. For a few minutes the only sounds were chewing and the soft clink of cups being set down. Josiah watched the children eat with the careful, measured movements of those who'd learned not to waste a single crumb. The little redhead Tommy finished first and looked up at Josiah with wide eyes. "Thank you for the food, mister. It's real good." "You're welcome. Are we gonna live here now?" Miss Abby said, "Maybe we'd find a place to stay, and this place has horses. I like horses. Can I see the horses?" "Tommy," Abigail said gently, "finish your water." "But, drink." Tommy drank, but his eyes kept drifting toward the window, toward the barn, where the horses waited. Josiah felt an unexpected tug somewhere in his chest. Daniel had loved horses too. "I haven't decided what's happening yet," Josiah said to no one in particular. "You can stay tonight. In the morning we'll figure out the rest." "Sir Josiah." Abigail set down her cup. "I know this is an imposition. I know we've given you no reason to help us. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to propose an arrangement." "I'm listening." "We need shelter. You—" She glanced around the kitchen, taking in the emptiness. The silence, the two clean surfaces of a house that had stopped being lived in. "You have a ranch that requires work. I was raised on a homestead. I know animals' crops' basic repairs. The older children can help too. Sam's good with horses. Grace can cook and clean. Will's a hard worker when he sets his mind to it." "Hey," Will protested, "I'm always a hard worker." "You're proposing to work for room and board," Josiah said. "I'm proposing to earn our keep. Properly. Legally, if you want to document it through the sheriff. I won't have anyone calling this charity, and I won't have anyone questioning whether the arrangement is proper." Abigail's voice steadied. "We're not beggars. We're not looking for handouts. We're looking for a chance." Josiah stared at her. At the fierce dignity holding her upright through exhaustion and grief. At the way her hand rested on Lottie's shoulder, automatic and protective. "You've thought this through," he said. "I've had 5 days of walking to do nothing but think. And if I say no, if I send you on your way tomorrow, then we keep walking." Abigail's chin lifted. "We'll find something eventually. We have to." The children had stopped eating, all of them watching, waiting, hope and fear warring in their young faces. "The town won't like it," Josiah said finally. "A woman and 6 children living on a bachelor's ranch. People talk. Let them talk." Talk turns to action sometimes. Questions about propriety, investigations, pressure to send the children to the orphanage after all. "I'll handle it." "Will you?" Josiah leaned forward. "Because I don't need trouble. I've spent 4 years building walls between myself and this town, and I'm not interested in tearing them down for strangers." Something sparked in Abigail's eyes. "Then why did you let us in?" The question hung in the air. Josiah didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had one, but it was buried so deep he couldn't reach it without excavating parts of himself he'd sealed off long ago. "I'll tell you in the morning," he said. "For now there's a room upstairs, second door on the right. The children can sleep there. All of them. It's big enough." He stood, began clearing plates. "You can take the room at the end of the hall." "I should stay with the children." "You should sleep somewhere with a real bed and a door that locks. The children will be fine." His voice softened slightly. "I'm not going to hurt them. Or you." Abigail studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Thank you, for tonight at least." "Don't thank me yet." She rose, gathering the smaller children, directing the older ones with quiet efficiency. At the doorway, she paused. "Mr. Blackwood, Josiah." "Josiah." She turned to face him. "I know you haven't decided anything. I know tomorrow might bring different answers. But whatever happens, thank you. For feeding them. For giving them one night in a warm place." Her voice cracked slightly. "It's more than most have offered." She led the children upstairs, their footsteps soft on the wooden stairs, small voices asking questions Josiah couldn't quite hear. He stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and the ghost of a family he'd never expected to find. Ruth would have laughed at him, would have said something about God working in mysterious ways, about doors opening when you least expected them. But Ruth was gone, and God hadn't done much for Josiah Blackwood in a very long time. He washed the dishes slowly, methodically, trying to sort through the impossible situation that had landed in his barn. 6 children. A woman barely old enough to take care of herself. No money, no prospects, nothing but desperation and determination. The smart thing would be to send them to town in the morning. Let the authorities handle it. Return to his isolation, his routine, his careful emptiness. The smart thing. Above him, floorboards creaked. Small feet, moving, settling. A child's laugh, quickly shushed. Then silence. Josiah dried his hands, hung the towel precisely where Ruth had always kept it, and walked to the window. Outside, the Montana night stretched endless and cold. Stars emerged one by one, indifferent to the small dramas playing out below them. 4 years of silence. 4 years of moving through days that felt identical, marking time until time ran out. And now this. 7 people sleeping in rooms that had sat empty since death moved through and took everything worth taking. Josiah pressed his hand against the cold glass and waited for morning to bring answers he wasn't sure he wanted. But somewhere deep in the frozen places of his heart, something stirred. Not hope, he wasn't fool enough to call it hope. More like recognition, like seeing a reflection in unexpected glass. They were all survivors here, all of them carrying losses too heavy for human shoulders. Maybe that was enough to start with. Maybe that was everything. Morning came, gray and reluctant clouds hanging low over the mountains like they couldn't decide whether to rain or move on. Josiah had been awake for hours, sitting in the kitchen with cold coffee, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house that suddenly held life again. Small feet on the stairs, whispered conversations, a child's cough quickly muffled. He'd made his decision somewhere around 3 in the morning, though he couldn't have said exactly when the scales tipped. Maybe it was the memory of Ruth's voice soft in his ear, asking what kind of man turns away starving children. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he was just tired of the silence. The kitchen door opened, and Abigail appeared. She'd done what she could with her appearance, hair re-braided, dress brushed clean of the worst dirt face, scrubbed pink. But nothing could hide the exhaustion carved into her features, or the wariness in her eyes. "Good morning," she said carefully. "I hope we didn't disturb you." "Been awake a while?" Josiah gestured toward the stove. "Coffee's hot. Help yourself." She poured a cup, her movements precise and economical. "The children are dressing. I told them to wait upstairs until you'd had a chance to think." "Already thought." He set down his own cup. "Sit down. We need to talk." Abigail sat across from him, her hands wrapped around the warm cup, her eyes never leaving his face, waiting, braced for rejection. "I'll take you on," Josiah said. "You and the children. Trial basis 1 month. You work, they work, the ones old enough, and we see how it goes." Her breath caught. "You mean it?" "I don't say things I don't mean." He held up a hand before she could speak. "But there's conditions, rules. You break them, the arrangement ends." "Name them." "First, the children sleep in the house, but you take the foreman's cabin out back. It's small, but it's private. Keeps things proper." Abigail nodded slowly. "That's wise." "Second, we go into town today, get this documented with the sheriff, legal and official. I won't have anyone saying I'm taking advantage." "Agreed." "Third, the children go to school. There's a schoolhouse in Cedar Valley. They attend regular, no exceptions." Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe. "You want them educated. I want them to have options. Education opens doors." Josiah's voice hardened slightly. "My son would have gone to that school, would have learned to read and write and figure numbers. Would have had choices I never had. He stopped, swallowed. These children deserve the same chance. Abigail was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. You lost a child. 2. And a wife. The words came out flat, practiced. 4 years ago. Fever took them. That's all you need to know. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. He stood abruptly. Get the children fed and ready. We leave for town in an hour. He was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him. Josiah. He turned. Abigail had risen too, standing straight despite her exhaustion, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been fierce determination. I won't let you down. None of us will. I swear it. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. They stared at each other across the kitchen. Two people bound by circumstance and loss, neither quite trusting the fragile bridge they were building. 1 hour, Josiah repeated, and walked out into the gray morning. The ride into Cedar Valley took most of the morning. Josiah drove the wagon with Abigail beside him on the bench the children arranged in the back among blankets and the few supplies they'd need for the return trip. Sam sat closest to the front, his young face alert, watching the landscape like he expected danger from every shadow. The town, Abigail said quietly, keeping her voice below the children's hearing. What should I expect? Curiosity mostly. Cedar Valley's small. Everyone knows everyone's business, and newcomers are rare. Josiah guided the horses around a rough patch in the road. There'll be questions, probably judgment. Some folks won't like the arrangement no matter how we document it. And you defend us? He glanced at her. I don't explain myself to anyone, never have, but I won't let them run you off either. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's the truth. Take it or leave it. Abigail was quiet for a moment. Then unexpectedly she laughed, a short, surprised sound that seemed to startle even her. What's funny? Nothing. Everything. She shook her head. I've spent 5 days preparing speeches, arguments, ways to convince whoever would listen that these children deserved a chance. And you just say yes and set rules and expect compliance. No negotiating, no convincing. She looked at him sidelong. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. More questions maybe. More resistance. More... She gestured vaguely. Normal human curiosity about who we are and where we came from. Your story's your own. You'll tell it when you're ready or you won't. Josiah's jaw tightened. I've got my own secrets I don't share. Figure you've got the same right. That's surprisingly fair. I'm a surprising man. Behind them, Tommy's voice piped up. Miss Abby, how much longer my bottom hurts from all the bouncing. Not much further, sweetheart. Will there be candy in town? Mama used to buy us candy sometimes when we went to town. Before she got sick, I mean. The wagon went quiet. Josiah felt Abigail stiffen beside him. Maybe, she said carefully. If you're very good. I'm always good. Mostly. Will says I'm a pest, but he's wrong. I'm just curious. That's different from being a pest, right? Miss Abby. Very different. See, Will? Miss Abby says I'm not a pest. She said curious is different from pest. Will shot back. She didn't say you weren't a pest. Children, Abigail said, a warning in her voice. Sorry, Miss Abby. Sorry. Josiah found himself almost smiling. Almost. Cedar Valley appeared on the horizon like a cluster of children's blocks, wooden buildings arranged along a single Main Street church steeple, rising above the rest. As they drew closer, Josiah felt the familiar weight of attention settling over them. Faces appearing in windows. Conversations stopping mid-sentence. Eyes tracking the wagon's progress with undisguised curiosity. Remember, he said to Abigail. Chin up. Don't apologize. Don't explain more than you have to. I know how to handle myself. Good. He guided the wagon to a stop outside the sheriff's office, set the brake, and climbed down. The children scrambled after him, clustering around Abigail like chicks around a hen, their eyes wide, as they took in the unfamiliar town. Sheriff Marcus Hensley was already stepping onto the boardwalk, a coffee cup in one hand and surprise on his weathered face. He was 45 solid and gray at the temples, with the steady eyes of a man who'd seen enough trouble to recognize it coming. "Josiah Blackwood." He set down the cup. "Been a while. Didn't expect to see you in town till spring supply run. Wasn't expecting to come." Josiah nodded toward Abigail and the children. "Got a situation needs documenting." Marcus's eyes swept over the group, lingering on the children's hollow cheeks. Abigail's bare feet, poorly hidden beneath her dress, the general air of desperate poverty that no amount of scrubbing could disguise. "I see that. You'd better come inside." The sheriff's office was small and neat, smelling of coffee and old paper. Marcus settled behind his desk, pulled out a ledger, and fixed Josiah with a steady look. "All right. Start from the beginning." Josiah told it straight, the children in his barn. Abigail's story, his decision to take them on as workers. He left out the emotional parts, the moments of weakness, the ghost of Ruth's voice in his ear. Just facts. That's what Marcus needed. When he finished, the sheriff turned to Abigail. "That match your account, miss?" "Yes, sir. Every word." "And these children, they came off the orphan train wreck up near Miller's Pass?" "That's right." Marcus leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Heard about that. Bad business. Killed a dozen people, including the matron in charge. Officials from back east have been sending telegrams trying to figure out what happened to the surviving children." Abigail's face went pale. Are they trying to take them back?" "Some. Others got placed with families before anyone could organize." He looked at the children still clustered near the door. "These 6 weren't on any official list I received. My parents took them in before the officials arrived. By the time anyone came looking, they were already settled at our homestead." Abigail's voice held an edge of defiance. "They're mine now, legally. My mother signed papers before she died." "You have those papers?" "Lost in the wagon accident, but I can swear to their contents." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm documenting that these children are in your care, Miss Thornton, and that Mr. Blackwood has employed you as his housekeeper with the children as part of the household. That makes everything legal and proper. Anyone wants to challenge it, they'll have to go through my office first." Relief washed over Abigail's face. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me yet. There'll be questions. People in this town like to talk, and a setup like yours gives them plenty to talk about." He fixed Josiah with a look. "You sure about this? It's going to mean the end of your privacy." "I'm sure. And you, Miss Thornton? You understand what you're signing up for. Small towns can be cruel to people who don't fit their expectations." "I understand." Abigail's chin lifted. "I've faced worse than small-town gossip." Marcus nodded slowly. "I believe you have." He dipped his pen in ink. "All right then, let's make this official." The paperwork took an hour. Names, ages, dates, circumstances, all of it recorded in Marcus's careful hand. Each child was noted. Samuel Whitmore, age 12. Grace Marie. Whitmore, age 11. William Hartley, age 9. Charlotte Brennan, age 7. Thomas O'Brien, age 5. Lily Rose Chen, age 4. When Marcus got to Lily's name, he paused. Chen. Her father was Chinese, Abigail said quietly. Railroad worker. Her mother was Irish. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, not judgment exactly, but awareness. There'll be some in town who take issue with that. Then they can take it up with me. Fair enough. He wrote the name down without further comment. By the time they emerged from the sheriff's office, the street had filled with curious onlookers. Women gathered outside the general store, heads bent together. Men lounged against fence posts, watching with studied casualness. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts. Ignore them, Josiah murmured to Abigail. I am. They made their way to the general store, the children trailing behind like a ragged parade. Inside the proprietor, a thin man named Harwick watched their approach with poorly concealed interest. Mr. Blackwood, didn't expect you for another month at least. Plans change. Josiah handed over a list. Need these supplies, and cloth for clothes enough for 6 children and a woman. Harwick's eyebrows rose. That's quite an order. That a problem? No, sir. No problem at all. He disappeared into the back, leaving Josiah and Abigail alone with the weight of unspoken questions hanging in the air. He'll tell everyone the moment we leave, Abigail said quietly. Let him. Nothing to hide. A woman entered the store 50-ish with graying hair pinned severely and a dress that spoke of money carefully spent. She stopped short at the sight of the children, her eyes narrowing. Mr. Blackwood. Her voice could have frozen water. I don't believe I've met your companions. Mrs. Whitfield. Josiah's tone was equally cold. This is Miss Abigail Thornton, my new housekeeper, and these are the children in her care. Children. Mrs. Whitfield's gaze swept over them with distaste. How charitable of you. Ain't charity. They work for their keep. Even the little ones. Her eyes fixed on Lily, who was hiding behind Grace's skirts. Even that one. Something dangerous flickered in Josiah's expression. That one has a name. Lily, and she's as much a part of this household as anyone. I see. Mrs. Whitfield's lip curled. Well, I'm sure the town will have much to say about this arrangement. A bachelor taking in a young woman and 6 orphans. It's hardly conventional. Conventional isn't a requirement for legal. Perhaps not, but propriety matters, Mr. Blackwood, especially in a town like this. Some of us have standards to maintain. Abigail stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Ma'am, with all due respect. It's all right? Josiah's hand closed briefly on her arm. Mrs. Whitfield was just leaving. I was doing no such thing. Then maybe you should be. His voice dropped to something low and dangerous. Unless you've got business with me besides insults. The two stared at each other, old money versus frontier grit, social standing versus moral authority. Mrs. Whitfield broke first, her cheeks flushing an angry red. This isn't finished, she said. The Women's Temperance Society will hear about this. All of it. I'm sure they will. Good day, ma'am. She swept out, nearly colliding with Harwick, returning with their supplies. The storekeeper watched her go with raised eyebrows, but said nothing. That'll be $12.40, he said instead. You want it on account? Cash. Josiah counted out the money. And we'll need those clothes made up. Is Mrs. Chen still doing alterations? Above the laundry, same as always. We'll stop there next. Outside, the children had gone quiet, their earlier chatter silenced by the confrontation they'd witnessed. Tommy pressed close to Abigail's leg, his small face troubled. Miss Abby, why was that lady so mean? Some people are scared of things they don't understand, sweetheart. But we're not scary. No, you're not scary at all. Abigail smoothed his hair. She'll learn that eventually. Or she won't, Sam said flatly. Some people never learn. They just hate. Sam. It's true, Miss Abby. You know it is. People hated us at the orphanage, too. Said we were worthless. Said we'd never amount to nothing. His young voice hardened. At least here we've got work. That's more than we had before. Josiah studied the boy, his rigid shoulders, his 2 old eyes, the pride that refused to bend even under the weight of constant rejection. You're right, he said quietly. Some people never learn. But that's their problem, not yours. You do your work, you keep your head up, and you let the rest roll off like water. That's how you survive. Sam met his eyes. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Yes, sir, the boy said. That's what I figured. Mrs. Chen was exactly as Josiah remembered, small, fierce, with measuring tape perpetually draped around her neck, and a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. She took one look at the children and launched into rapid Cantonese before switching to English. "Too thin," she announced. "All of them. Need feeding. Also need clothes that fit. These rags," she gestured dismissively at their worn garments, "not fit for barn animals." "That's why we're here," Josiah said. "Need enough clothes for all 6 plus Miss Thornton. Work clothes sturdy, and one set of Sunday clothes for each." "Sunday clothes?" Mrs. Chen's eyes sharpened. "You taking them to church, if they want to go?" She circled the children like a hawk, measuring with her eyes before pulling out her tape. "Good. Church important. Community important. These children need community." She fixed Josiah with a pointed look. "You need community too. 4 years hiding on that ranch. Not healthy." "My health is my own business. Your business become my business when you bring starving children to my shop." She began measuring Grace, her movements quick and efficient. "You feed them proper, yes. Good food. Meat, vegetables, bread. Not just beans and coffee like you probably eat. I eat fine. You eat like sad old man with no wife. I know. Everyone knows." Mrs. Chen moved on to Sam. "Stand straight, boy. Good posture makes good man." The fitting took an hour. By the end, Mrs. Chen had measured all 6 children, extracted promises of proper feeding from both Josiah and Abigail, and somehow managed to make even taciturn Sam crack a smile with her rapid-fire commentary. 3 days, she said as they prepared to leave. "Come back first fitting. I work fast for children." Her voice softened slightly. "They good children, I can tell. Good children deserve good clothes." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Abigail's voice was thick. "For everything." "No thanks. Just bring them back in 3 days, and feed them. Real food." The ride home was quieter than the ride into town. The children dozed against each other in the back of the wagon, exhausted by the morning's events. Even Sam's watchful eyes had finally closed, his head drooping against Grace's shoulder. "They're good kids," Josiah said, surprising himself. Abigail glanced at him. "You sound surprised." "Had low expectations. Kids from orphan trains, they usually come with problems. Behavior issues, health issues, trust issues. They have all of those. They've just learned to hide them." She looked back at the sleeping children. "Sam still has nightmares about the fire that killed his parents. Grace barely speaks to anyone except Lily. Will acts out when he's scared, which is most of the time. Lottie cries for her mother every night. Tommy's too young to understand what he's lost, which might be worse. And Lily," she trailed off. "The silent one. She saw her parents die, both of them in the railroad explosion. She was 4 years old, and she watched them burn." Abigail's voice was barely a whisper. "She hasn't spoken more than a handful of words since." Josiah thought of Daniel, of the fever that had taken him in 3 terrible days, burning bright and hot until there was nothing left. "Trauma's a strange thing," he said slowly. "It takes different people different ways. Some get loud, some go quiet, some just stop." "Is that what happened to you?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He didn't answer for a long moment, focused on the road ahead, the familiar rhythm of the horse's hooves. "I stopped," he finally said. 4 years ago, when Ruth and the children died, I just stopped living and started surviving instead. And now I don't know." He looked at her, at the children sleeping behind them, at the sky stretching endless above. "Maybe I'm starting again. Maybe this is what starting looks like." Abigail was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and touched his arm just briefly, just enough to acknowledge what he'd shared. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me. Don't make a habit of asking." "I won't." But she was almost smiling. The ranch appeared on the horizon, building solid against the fading light. Home, Josiah thought, and was surprised to realize he meant it. Maybe that was what starting looked like after all. That evening, Josiah showed Abigail the foreman's cabin, small but clean, with a bed, a wood stove, and a window that faced the mountains. She accepted it without complaint, though he could see her calculating the distance between herself and the children. "It's not far," he said, reading her thoughts. 30 steps from the back door of the house. If they need you in the night, they'll know where to find you." "I know, it's just hard, being apart from them." "You can't protect them every moment. Trying will only break you." Spoken from experience. The question was gentle, but it cut deep. Josiah turned away, busying himself with the lamp. "The children will need supper," he said. "I'll show you where everything is in the kitchen." "Josiah?" He stopped. "I know you've been hurt." Abigail's voice was soft but sure. "I know you've lost things that can never be replaced. I know you took us in because you saw something of yourself in our situation, maybe something of your family. Don't. I'm not asking for your secrets. I'm not even asking for your trust." She moved closer, close enough that he could see the determination in her eyes. "I'm just telling you that I see you. The real you. Not the gruff rancher who barks orders and keeps the world at arm's length. The man underneath who feeds starving children and arranges for their education and defends them against town gossip. You don't know me. Not yet. But I'd like to, if you'll let me." The silence stretched between them, heavy weighted with possibility. "Supper," Josiah said finally. "The children need supper." He walked out before she could respond, his heart pounding harder than it had in 4 years. Behind him, he thought he heard Abigail laugh, soft, surprised, maybe a little sad. But he didn't look back. 3 weeks passed, and the ranch began to breathe again. Josiah found himself waking to sounds he'd forgotten existed. Children's laughter echoing across the yard, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, small feet thundering up and down stairs that had known only silence for 4 years. It was jarring at first, almost painful, like blood returning to a limb that had gone numb. But slowly, without his permission, he started to adjust. Sam proved himself invaluable with the horses, his quiet confidence in the saddle surprising for a city boy. Grace took over the kitchen, with an efficiency that reminded Josiah of Ruth, though he'd never say so aloud. Will's boundless energy found purpose in the endless chores of ranch life, and even little Lottie contributed her small hands, surprisingly capable with the chickens. Tommy followed Josiah everywhere, a red-headed shadow full of questions. "Why do horses need shoes, Mr. Josiah? Do their feet hurt without them? Can I brush the big brown one? What's his name? Why don't you name your horses?" Mama always said animals should have names. It makes them feel loved. "Horses don't care about names," Josiah said gruffly. "They care about food and shelter and not being worked too hard." "But don't you get lonely calling them the brown one and the gray mare?" "I'd get lonely if nobody called me Tommy." Josiah had no answer for that. He found himself later that evening standing in the barn and looking at the big brown gelding who'd been with him for 6 years. "Samuel," he said quietly, testing the name. The horse's ears flicked forward. "No, too formal. How about—" He thought of the boy, of Sam's steady presence and watchful eyes. "Ranger, that suits you better." The horse whickered softly, and Josiah felt something crack open in his chest. Abigail noticed the change, though she was wise enough not to comment on it directly. She'd settled into the rhythm of ranch life, with the same fierce determination she brought to everything rising before dawn, working, until her hands ached, falling into exhausted sleep, only to rise and do it all again. But she was also watching, learning, fitting the pieces of Josiah Blackwood together like a puzzle she was determined to solve. "You named the horse," she said one morning, catching him in the barn. "Tommy told me. He's very excited about it." "Boy talks too much." "He's 5. Talking is what 5-year-olds do." She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell the soap she'd used that morning. "He also told me you let him help brush Ranger yesterday, and that you promised to teach him to ride when he's bigger." "Didn't promise. Said maybe." "To Tommy, that's the same thing." Abigail's voice softened. "You're good with them, Josiah, better than you think." "I'm not." "You are. Sam respects you, which isn't easy to earn." Grace actually smiled at dinner last night, a real smile, not the polite one she uses for strangers. Even Lily watches you when you're not looking like she's trying to figure you out. She paused. They're starting to feel safe here. That's because of you. Josiah didn't know what to say. He'd spent 4 years convincing himself that he had nothing left to offer anyone, that his capacity for connection had died with Ruth and Daniel and baby Sarah. But these children with their hungry eyes and wounded hearts kept proving him wrong. "School starts Monday," he said instead of responding. "You'll need to take them into town for registration." "I know. Mrs. Chen finished their clothes yesterday. They'll look presentable at least." Abigail's voice tightened slightly. "I'm worried about Lily. She still hasn't spoken more than a few words. She'll talk when she's ready." "What if she's never ready? What if she's too damaged?" Josiah turned to face her. "She's 4 years old. She watched her parents die. She's not damaged. She's surviving, same as the rest of us." His voice roughened. "You give her time, you give her safety, you give her love. The rest will come." "You sound very sure." "I'm not sure of anything, but I know what it's like to lose so much you forget how to speak. Words stop making sense when grief is that heavy." He looked away. "She'll find her voice again. Might take a week, might take a year. But she will." Abigail was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched his arm, the same brief contact she'd offered weeks ago. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding." Mule. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Josiah alone with the horses and the unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. Monday came, bright and cold frost glittering on the grass as Abigail loaded the children into the wagon for their first day of school. Sam sat rigid beside her, his jaw set against whatever cruelties awaited. Grace held Lily in her lap, murmuring softly in the little girl's ear. Will bounced with nervous energy, while Lottie clutched her rag doll, and Tommy peppered Abigail with questions. "Will there be other kids? Will they like us? What if they don't like us? What if the teacher is mean? My teacher back home was nice, but then Mama died and I had to leave and—" "Breathe, sweetheart." Abigail smoothed his hair. "Whatever happens, you'll handle it. You're braver than you know." "Am I brave, Miss Abby, really?" "The bravest 5-year-old I've ever met." Josiah watched them go from the porch, his coffee growing cold in his hands. He told himself it was concern for the ranch that kept him rooted there watching until the wagon disappeared over the ridge. Told himself it had nothing to do with the hollow feeling in his chest, the sense that the house had suddenly grown too quiet again. He worked through the morning, losing himself in the physical labor of mending fences and moving cattle. But his mind kept drifting back to the children, imagining their small faces confronting the casual cruelty of strangers. When the wagon returned that afternoon, he was waiting in the yard, though he'd have denied it if anyone asked. Abigail's face told him everything before she spoke, tight with anger, carefully controlled. "That bad?" he asked. "Worse." She helped the children, down her movements sharp. "Sam, take the others inside. There's bread and jam in the kitchen." "Yes, Miss Abby." Sam's voice was flat, his eyes hard. He gathered the younger children and herded them toward the house, but not before Josiah caught the bruise forming on his cheekbone. "What happened?" "A boy called Lily a word I won't repeat. Sam punched him. The teacher made Sam apologize in front of the entire class but didn't make the other boy apologize for what he said." Abigail's hands were shaking. "When I tried to speak to her about it, she suggested that perhaps children of Lily's background would be more comfortable with their own kind." The cold fury that swept through Josiah surprised him with its intensity. "What's the teacher's name?" "Miss Hartwell. Why?" "Because I'm going to have a conversation with her." "Josiah." "She insulted a child in my household, a child under my protection." His voice dropped to something low and dangerous. "That doesn't stand." He was saddling Ranger before Abigail could argue, his jaw set in a line that invited no discussion. She caught his arm as he prepared to mount. "Don't make it worse, please. They have to go back there tomorrow." "And they will. But that teacher needs to understand that these children have people willing to fight for them." He met her eyes. "Did you really think I'd let this pass?" I hoped you'd be practical. Practical doesn't protect children from cruelty. Action does. He swung into the saddle. Make sure Sam puts something cold on that bruise. I'll be back before dark. The schoolhouse was empty when Josiah arrived, but he found Miss Hartwell in the small living quarters attached to the back, a pinch-faced woman in her 30s, with the self-righteous air of someone who'd never had her authority questioned. Mr. Blackwood? She recovered from her surprise, quickly drawing herself up. I wasn't expecting visitors. Wasn't expecting to visit, but circumstances require it. He didn't dismount, looking down at her from Ranger's back. You humiliated my boy today. Made him apologize for defending his sister while the one who started it walked free. Your boy started a fight on school grounds. There are rules. Rules that apply equally to everyone. Because from what I hear, the other child's offense was worse than a punch. Miss Hartwell's face reddened. The other child used inappropriate language, yes, but Samuel's response was violent. We cannot tolerate violence in our school. You can tolerate cruelty, though. Racial slurs against a 4-year-old girl. That's acceptable in your classroom. I don't see how... Let me be clear. Josiah leaned forward, his voice going flat and hard. Those children are mine. All 6 of them. They're going to attend your school because education matters, and they're going to be treated with the same respect as any other student. If I hear one more report of discrimination against Lily, or any of the others, I will take it up with the school board, the sheriff, and anyone else who will listen. Do we understand each other? Miss Hartwell's mouth opened and closed. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening. I'm informing. He straightened in the saddle. Those children have been through more hardship than you can imagine. They deserve better than a teacher who punishes victims and coddles bullies. I suggest you think carefully about what kind of classroom you want to run. He turned Ranger toward home, without waiting for a response, his heart pounding with something that felt almost like hope. He'd stood up for them, defended them as if they were his own. Maybe somehow they'd become exactly that. 2 days later, the trouble came calling at the ranch. Josiah was in the barn when he heard the horses approaching too many for casual visitors, moving too fast for friendly intent. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the yard just as 6 riders crested the ridge. The man in front was broad-shouldered and well-dressed, sitting his horse with the easy arrogance of money. Behind him rode 5 others ranch hands, by the look of them armed and watchful. Josiah Blackwood. The man's voice carried the cultured accent of Eastern education. Been meaning to pay you a visit. Cornelius Drake. Josiah kept the rifle lowered but ready. Can't say I've been anticipating the pleasure. No, I don't suppose you have. Drake dismounted, landing heavily. We need to talk about your new household arrangements. My arrangements aren't your concern. They become my concern when they affect the value of property in this valley. Drake moved closer, his small eyes sweeping the ranch with undisguised assessment. Word in town is you've taken in a woman and 6 orphan children, creating quite a scandal. Word in town is wrong. I've hired a housekeeper and provided housing for her and the children in her care. Everything's legal and documented. Legal, perhaps, but proper. Drake's lip curled. A bachelor your age living alone with a young woman and half a dozen brats? People are asking questions, Blackwood. Uncomfortable questions. People can mind their own business. That's not how communities work. We have standards, expectations, a reputation to maintain. Drake's voice hardened. This territory is trying to become a state. We can't afford scandals that make us look like lawless heathens. The only scandal I see is you riding onto my land uninvited to lecture me about propriety. Josiah's finger moved closer to the trigger. Say your piece and get out. My piece is simple. Drake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer for this ranch. 20% above market value. You take the money, relocate somewhere else, and take your charity cases with you. Everyone wins. This land isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, Blackwood. It's just a matter of finding the right price. Drake glanced around again, his gaze calculating. 500 acres of prime grazing land, water rights to the creek-established buildings. You're sitting on a fortune, and you're wasting it on some misguided attempt at playing savior. I'm not playing anything. This is my home. A home full of ghosts and orphans, and a woman who isn't your wife. Drake's voice turned ugly. How long before the town decides that's not acceptable? How long before someone files a complaint about the welfare of those children? How long before the authorities start asking whether a bitter recluse is really the best guardian for 6 innocent young lives? The threat hung in the air, cold and clear. Get off my land! Josiah raised the rifle. Now! I'm leaving, but think about what I said. Drake mounted his horse, looking down at Josiah with contempt. That offer won't stay open forever, and neither will the town's patience with your unconventional household. The riders departed in a cloud of dust, leaving Josiah standing alone with his rifle and his racing thoughts. Who was that? He turned to find Abigail in the doorway of the house, the children clustered behind her. Her face was pale, but her eyes held the same fierce determination he'd come to recognize. Cornelius Drake, biggest rancher in the valley, been wanting my land for years. Josiah lowered the rifle slowly. He's not going to stop. What does he want? To buy me out. Failing that, to drive me out, using you and the children as leverage. Abigail's jaw tightened. The children heard. Sam wanted to come out with a pitchfork. Good instincts. Despite everything, Josiah almost smiled. Bad tactical decision. What do? We don't panic, we don't run, we stay and we work, and we prove that we belong here just as much as anyone. He met her eyes. Can you do that? I've been proving I belong places my whole life. What's one more battle? That's what I figured. The children were watching from the doorway. Sam with his fists clenched. Grace with her arms around Lily, the younger ones pressed close together, 6 pairs of eyes looking to him for answers he wasn't sure he had. Supper, Josiah said finally. We all need supper, and after that we're going to have a family meeting. The word slipped out before he could catch it. Family. But no one corrected him. And standing there surrounded by people who'd stumbled into his life and somehow made it worth living again, Josiah Blackwood began to understand what he was fighting for. That night, gathered around the kitchen table, Josiah told them the truth. There are people in town who don't want us together, he said, looking at each face in turn. They think a man like me shouldn't be taking care of children like you. They think Miss Abby shouldn't be living here without being married. They think Lily doesn't belong because of who her parents were. That's stupid, Will burst out. Lily belongs just as much as anyone. I agree, but stupid people can still cause problems. Josiah leaned forward. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything will be easy. It won't. There will be hard days ahead. People will say cruel things. They'll try to make us doubt ourselves, doubt each other. What do? Sam asked quietly. We stick together. We work hard. We prove them wrong every single day. Josiah's voice strengthened. I didn't ask for this family, didn't plan on it, but now that I have it, I'm not giving it up without a fight. Neither are we, Abigail said softly. Around the table, the children nodded, Sam with grim determination, Grace with quiet resolve, even little Tommy with his small chin lifted, and Lily silent. Lily, who hadn't spoken more than a handful of words in months, looked at Josiah with something new in her dark eyes. Trust. Fragile and tentative, but unmistakably there. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The days that followed were tense, but productive. Word of Drake's visit had spread through town, and opinions were dividing sharply. Some people, the Chens, Sheriff Hensley, a few farming families made a point of greeting Abigail warmly when she came to town for supplies. Others crossed the street to avoid her, their silence speaking louder than words. Miss Hartwell's attitude at school improved marginally after Josiah's visit, though Sam reported that she still favored certain students over others. The children learned to navigate the social minefield with the resilience that only the young possess, finding allies among the other outsiders and ignoring the cruelty of the rest. Through it all, Josiah watched and waited, knowing that Drake wasn't finished. The attack came on a Thursday evening 3 weeks after the first visit. Josiah was checking the fence line when he smelled the smoke. He wheeled Ranger toward the ranch, his heart seizing in his chest. The barn. The barn was on fire, flames already licking at the roof, smoke billowing into the darkening sky. He pushed Ranger to a gallop, his mind racing through possibilities. The horses were in there. The feed, the tack, everything they needed to keep the ranch running. And the children, where were the children? He found them in the yard, Abigail herding them away from the flames with desperate urgency. Sam was trying to run toward the barn and she was physically holding him back. "The horses!" Sam screamed. "We have to get the horses out. It's too dangerous." Josiah was already off Ranger and running. He heard Abigail shout his name, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Those animals were his responsibility, his livelihood, his connection to everything he'd built. The heat hit him like a physical force as he pulled open the barn door. Smoke poured out thick and choking, but he could hear the horses screaming inside, the high, terrified sound of animals facing death. He plunged in. The next few minutes were chaos, grabbing halters, cutting ropes, forcing panicked animals toward the door through a hell of smoke and flame. His lungs burned, his eyes streamed, but he kept moving, kept working, kept pulling horses to safety, one by one. Sam appeared beside him, a bandana tied over his face, grabbing the halter of a rearing mare. "I've got her, go. Get out of here, boy. Not without you." Together, they fought their way through the smoke, the last 2 horses between them, the roof groaning ominously above. They burst into the clear air just as a section of the barn collapsed behind them, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Josiah fell to his knees, coughing, his lungs on fire. Hands grabbed him, Abigail's hands pulling him further from the flames, her voice frantic in his ear. "Josiah! Josiah! Are you all right? Talk to me!" He looked up at her face streaked with soot and tears and managed to croak, "I'm fine. The horses, all safe, every one of them." Her voice broke. "You saved them. You and Sam. You saved them all." Sam stood nearby, bent over and gasping, but his eyes found Josiah's with something that hadn't been there before. Respect. Trust. The beginning of something that might someday be called love. The barn burned until there was nothing left but embers and ash. Josiah sat on the porch steps watching the last flames die, his body aching and his mind turning over the implications. It wasn't an accident. Abigail settled beside him, her shoulder brushing his. Was it? No, someone said it deliberately. He'd found the kerosene-soaked rags near the back corner, the telltale signs of arson. Drake's making his move. Can we prove it? Probably not. He's too smart to leave witnesses. Josiah's hands clenched. But I know it was him, and he knows I know. What do we do? Rebuild, same as always. He looked at her, really looked, taking in the strength and determination that had carried her through loss after loss. You're asking a lot of questions tonight. You're giving a lot of answers. Her mouth curved slightly. Progress. Abby. You called me Abby. Had he? The familiarity had slipped out without permission, another barrier falling without his consent. You saved Sam tonight, she continued. He ran in there to help you, but you saved him. Pushed him out when the roof started falling. Her voice thickened. You could have died. So could he. But you made sure he didn't. You protected him like he was your own son. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. He's a good boy, Josiah said finally. They're all good kids. They deserve someone willing to fight for them. They have that. They have you. And you. Don't sell yourself short. You held this family together through things that would have broken most people. Family. Abigail tested the word. Is that what we are? Josiah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the smoking ruins of his barn, at the horses huddled together in the corral, at the house still standing solid against the night. "I don't know what we are," he admitted. "But whatever it is, I'm not willing to lose it." It was the closest he'd come to a declaration, and they both knew it. Abigail reached over and took his hand. Her fingers were rough from work, cold from the night air, and they fit against his like they'd always belonged there. "Neither am I," she said. They sat together until dawn, watching the stars wheel overhead, their hands clasped between them. And in the house behind them, 6 children slept peacefully, unaware that the battle for their family had only just begun. The rebuilding started before the ashes had finished cooling. Josiah was measuring timber at dawn, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. He'd slept maybe 2 hours, his mind too full of plans and worries to rest properly. The barn had been more than just a building. It was storage shelter, the backbone of the entire operation. Without it, the ranch would struggle to survive the coming winter. Sam appeared beside him carrying a saw that was almost too big for his 12-year-old arms. "I want to help," the boy said, no question in his voice, statement of fact. "You should be getting ready for school." "School can wait. This is more important." Josiah studied him, the set of his jaw, the determination in his eyes, the bruise on his cheekbone that had faded to yellow, but still marked him as someone who'd stood up for family. "Your education matters," Josiah said. "So does this barn. So does proving we're not going anywhere." Sam's voice hardened. "Drake thinks he can scare us off, burning our barn, threatening our family. I want him to see us building it back up. I want him to know we don't break that easy." Something shifted in Josiah's chest. Pride, maybe. Recognition. "All right," he said. "But you're going to school after lunch. Non-negotiable." "Yes, sir." They worked side by side through the morning, the rhythm of sawing and hammering filling the silence between them. Josiah found himself explaining things as they went, how to measure twice and cut once, how to test the soundness of wood, how to build a foundation that would hold for decades. Sam absorbed it all, asking questions when he didn't understand, nodding when he did. He was smart, this boy, quick and capable, and hungry to learn. "Mr. Josiah," Sam's voice was careful testing. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "The fire last night, when you went into the barn." Sam paused, his hands stilling on the wood. "You could have died. Why'd you do it? The horses needed saving. But you didn't hesitate, didn't even think about it." Sam looked at him directly. "My pa, my real pa. He hesitated. When the fire started at our house, he tried to save things instead of getting us out first. That's how he died. He went back for his money box, and the roof came down." The words hung heavy between them. "I'm sorry," Josiah said quietly. "About your father. He wasn't a bad man, just scared. Scared of being poor, scared of losing what little we had." Sam's voice roughened. "But you went in there for the horses. Not for money or things, for lives." "Animals have lives too." "I know. That's what I mean." Sam swallowed hard. "You're different from him. Different from most of the men I've known. You act like things matter. Like we matter." Josiah set down his hammer. "You do matter. All of you. That's not something you have to earn or prove. It just is." "People always told us we didn't matter. At the orphanage, on the train, even some of the families we got placed with before." Sam's jaw tightened. "They said we were lucky to get whatever scraps they threw us, that orphans should be grateful for anything. Those people were wrong. I know that now." Sam met his eyes. "Because of you. Because of Miss Abby. Because of this place." The silence stretched between them, filled with things neither of them quite knew how to say. "We should get back to work," Josiah said finally. "This barn won't build itself." "Yes, sir." But as they returned to their labor, something had changed. The distance between them had narrowed, the walls had cracked just a little more. And when Josiah glanced over at the boy working beside him, he saw not just a hired hand or a charity case, but something that looked remarkably like a sun. The help arrived that afternoon, and it came from unexpected quarters. Josiah was hoisting a beam into place when he heard wagons approaching, multiple wagons loaded with lumber and supplies. He reached for his rifle before recognizing the man leading the convoy. Sheriff Marcus Hensley driving a wagon piled high with wood planks. Behind him came 3 more wagons. Mrs. Chen sat in the second, her husband driving their vehicle, loaded with canvas and rope. The third held Reverend Abbott and his wife Martha, carrying what looked like food supplies. And the fourth? Josiah's jaw tightened. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, the town's only female physician, sat beside a farmer named Garrett, who'd never said 2 words to Josiah in the 4 years since Ruth died. "What is this?" Josiah asked as Marcus pulled his wagon to a stop. "Barn raising." Marcus jumped down, brushing dust from his coat. "Word got around about your trouble. Some folks decided to help." "Hey, I didn't ask for help." "No, you didn't. That's part of why we're here." Mrs. Chen was already out of her wagon directing her husband toward the worksite. "Stubborn man never asks for anything. So we bring anyway." "Mrs. Chen, you argue with me, you lose. You know this." She fixed him with a sharp look. "Children need barn for winter. Horses need shelter. You need help. Simple." More people were arriving now, some Josiah recognized, and some he didn't. Farm families from outlying homesteads, a few shopkeepers from town, even Miss Hartwell's replacement, a young teacher named Clara Brennan, who'd taken over after the school board decided Miss Hartwell's methods were no longer acceptable. Abigail emerged from the house, the children trailing behind her, her face showing the same confusion Josiah felt. "I don't understand," she said. "After everything, the gossip, the judgment, Drake's threats, why are you all here?" "Martha." Abbott stepped forward, her gentle face creased with concern. "Because what happened to your barn was wrong. Everyone knows Drake was behind it, even if no one can prove it. And because—" She glanced at her husband. "Because we should have come sooner. Should have welcomed you properly when you first arrived, instead of letting fear and suspicion guide our actions." "We were wrong," Reverend Abbott added. "The town was wrong. Not all of us, but enough that it made your lives harder than they needed to be. This is our way of making amends." Josiah felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized he'd been holding tight. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Marcus advised. "Just put us to work. We've got a barn to build and daylight's burning." The work that followed was unlike anything Josiah had experienced in 4 years of isolation. Men swarmed the construction site, their movements coordinated by an invisible efficiency born of shared purpose. Women organized food and supplies, keeping the workers fed and watered. Children, including his 6, ran messages and carried tools and found countless ways to contribute. And at the center of it all, Josiah worked alongside neighbors he'd deliberately avoided for years, accepting their help without quite knowing how to feel about it. "You look uncomfortable," Dr. Hawkins observed during a brief water break. She was a tall woman with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing. Not used to people being kind. Not used to people at all, if I'm honest. Grief will do that. Make you build walls so high you forget there's a world outside them. She took a long drink of water. "I treated your wife, you know, during her final illness. And your son." Josiah's hand tightened on his cup. "I remember. They were good people. Ruth especially. She talked about you constantly, about how you'd closed yourself off after the war, how she'd spent years convincing you that life was worth living." Dr. Hawkins paused. "She'd be glad to see you opening up again." "Who says I'm opening up?" "Those 6 children who follow you around like ducklings. That woman who looks at you like you hung the moon. The fact that you're standing here talking to me instead of telling me to mind my own business." She smiled slightly. "Ruth would be proud, Josiah. Whatever you think you've lost, you're building something new, something worth fighting for." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him with thoughts he wasn't ready to examine. By evening, the barn's frame stood complete, a skeleton of fresh timber rising against the darkening sky. The workers packed up their tools, accepted Abigail's grateful thanks, and headed home with promises to return the next day. When the last wagon had disappeared over the ridge, Josiah stood alone in the yard, staring at what they'd accomplished. "You're crying." He turned to find Abigail beside him, her face soft in the fading light. "I'm not." He touched his cheek, found it wet. "I don't cry." Everyone cries, even stubborn ranchers who think emotion is weakness. She moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's." He struggled for words. "I spent 4 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That isolation was safety. That walls kept out pain. And now I'm standing here with a half-built barn that a dozen people showed up to help construct. Children sleeping in my house who call me Mr. Josiah like it means something. A woman who—" He stopped, unable to continue. "A woman who, what?" Josiah turned to face her. The dying light caught the red in her hair, turned her eyes to something deep and warm. "A woman who makes me remember what hope feels like," he said quietly. "And that terrifies me." Abigail's breath caught. "Josiah, I lost everything once. Ruth, Daniel, Sarah. Everything I loved gone in the span of 6 months. And I swore I'd never let myself care that much again, because the pain of losing them nearly killed me." His voice roughened. "But then you showed up with your fierce eyes, and your impossible situation, and your 6 children who needed someone to fight for them. And somewhere along the way, without my permission, I started caring again." "Is that so terrible?" "It's the most terrifying thing I've ever done." He reached out his calloused hand, brushing her cheek. "Because if I lose you, any of you, I don't think I'll survive it." Abigail leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. "Then we won't let you lose us," she said simply. "We'll fight. Together. Whatever comes." "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about this has been easy. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it." She covered his hand with hers. "You gave us a home when we had nothing. You protected us when the world wanted to tear us apart. You became a father to 6 children who'd forgotten what fathers were supposed to be." Her voice broke slightly. "Don't you understand? You already are everything you're afraid to become. You just haven't admitted it yet." For a long moment, they stood there, hands clasped, hearts beating in rhythm. Then Josiah pulled her close and held on like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. The barn raising continued for 3 more days, and with each passing hour, something shifted in Cedar Valley. People who'd whispered about the improper arrangement at the Blackwood Ranch began to see the truth of family forming from broken pieces held together by love and determination. Even the children sensed the change. "People are being nicer," Will observed one afternoon, helping carry shingles to the roof. "At school, I mean. That kid who called Lily names. He apologized yesterday. Said his mom made him." "Good," Josiah grunted, hammering another nail. "And Miss Brennan, the new teacher, she said Lily could draw pictures instead of writing for now, since she doesn't talk much. She said pictures are a language too." Josiah paused his hammer mid-swing. "She said that—" "Yep, she even hung Lily's drawing on the wall. It was a horse, a brown one that looked like Ranger." Will grinned. Lily smiled when she saw it up there. A real smile, not a scared one. Something warm spread through Josiah's chest. Progress. Small, fragile, but real. That's goodwill. That's real good. "Mr. Josiah." The boy's voice turned hesitant. "Can I tell you something?" "Go ahead." "I used to have a family. A real one, I mean. Before the orphanage, before everything." Will's hands stilled on the shingles. "My pa worked in the mines. He died in a cave-in when I was 7. Ma couldn't take care of all 4 of us alone, so she put us on the orphan train. Said she'd send for us when she got back on her feet." "Did she?" "Don't know. Never heard from her again." Will's voice was carefully flat. "I've got 2 brothers and a sister out there somewhere. Got placed with different families along the way. Lost track of them." Josiah set down his hammer, giving the boy his full attention. That's a hard thing to carry. I used to dream about finding them, making us a family again. Will swallowed hard. But lately I've been thinking, maybe family isn't just the people you're born to. Maybe it's the people who choose you. That's a wise thought for a 9-year-old. I'm almost 10. Will managed a small smile. Point is, I stopped looking backward so much. Started looking at what's right in front of me. And what's in front of me is pretty good. Yeah, Josiah said quietly. It is. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The wind came first, howling down from the peaks with a ferocity that rattled windows and sent the horses pacing nervously in the temporary corral. Then the rain, not gentle spring rain, but the kind of deluge that turned the ground to rivers and the sky to solid gray. Josiah checked on the animals, secured everything that could blow away, then retreated to the house where Abigail had gathered the children in the parlor. "Will the new barn be okay?" Tommy asked, his face pressed against the window. "It's not finished yet. What if it blows down?" "It's solid construction," Josiah assured him. "Built to withstand worse than this." Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder so loud it shook the house. Lottie screamed and buried her face in Abigail's shoulder. Grace pulled Lily closer, murmuring something soothing. Even Sam looked unsettled, though he tried to hide it. "Everybody away from the windows," Josiah ordered. "Center of the house is safest." They gathered in the kitchen, the heart of the home sitting on the floor in a loose circle. The storm raged outside, but inside was warm and dry and full of people who'd chosen to be family. "Tell us a story," Tommy begged. "Please, Mr. Josiah, stories make storms less scary." "I'm not much of a storyteller." "Please." 6 pairs of eyes looked up at him, waiting. Even Lily, who rarely showed interest in anything, was watching with quiet attention. "All right." Josiah settled against the wall, searching his memory for something suitable. "This is a story my mother used to tell me when I was young, about a man who lost everything and had to find his way home." "That sounds sad," Lottie said. "It starts sad, but it doesn't end that way." Josiah took a breath. Once there was a farmer who lived on the most beautiful land in the valley. He had a wife he loved, children who filled his house with laughter, and crops that grew tall and strong every season. He thought his happiness would last forever. The children leaned closer, caught in the spell of his voice. But one year, a terrible drought came. The crops withered, the animals died, and sickness swept through the valley, taking the farmer's wife and children one by one. Josiah's voice roughened, but he pressed on. The farmer was alone, and he believed his heart had turned to stone. "What did he do?" Grace asked quietly. "He closed himself off from the world, built walls around his property and walls around his heart. Decided that if he never loved anything again, he could never lose anything again." Josiah paused. "He lived like that for years, just surviving, never living." "But something changed," Abigail said softly. "Didn't it?" Josiah met her eyes across the circle of children. One day a woman arrived at his door with 6 children who had nowhere else to go. They were hungry and scared and had lost everything just like him. The farmer wanted to turn them away. It was safer that way, but something stopped him. "What?" Tommy breathed. He saw himself in them, saw his own pain reflected in their eyes, and he realized that maybe, just maybe, the walls he'd built weren't protecting him. They were killing him slowly, stone by stone. Josiah's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. So he let them in, and piece by piece they helped him remember how to live again. The storm howled outside, but no one noticed anymore. "Did they become a family?" Lottie asked. "The farmer and the woman and the children?" "Yes," Josiah said. "They did. Not all at once. It took time and trust and more than a few arguments. But eventually they built something stronger than any of them could have built alone." "That's us," Tommy said with sudden certainty. "The story is about us." "Maybe it is." I like that story. Tommy crawled across the circle and climbed into Josiah's lap without asking permission. I like being part of it. Josiah's arms came up automatically, wrapping around the small body with a tenderness he'd thought lost forever. The other children were watching Sam with something like hope, Grace with quiet tears, Will with a grin he was trying to hide, and Lily. Lily was moving. Slowly, carefully, she extracted herself from Grace's arms and crossed the circle to where Josiah sat with Tommy. She reached up and touched his face with one small hand. "Home," she said. The word was barely a whisper, rusty from disuse, but it echoed through the kitchen like a thunderclap. Abigail pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Grace sobbed openly. Even Sam's composure cracked, his eyes going bright and wet. "Lily," Abigail breathed. "Lily, sweetheart, you spoke." The little girl didn't respond to her. Her eyes stayed fixed on Josiah, her hand still touching his cheek. "Home," she said again, stronger this time. Josiah couldn't speak, could barely breathe past the knot in his throat. 4 years of silence, 4 years of believing he had nothing left to give, and this child, this wounded, traumatized, beautiful child, had looked at him and found something worth naming. "Yeah," he finally managed. "Home." He pulled her into his arms alongside Tommy, holding them both, with the desperation of a man who'd just been given back everything he'd thought he'd lost. The storm raged on outside, but inside the kitchen a family held on to each other and weathered it together. And for the first time in 4 years, Josiah Blackwood cried. Not from grief. From something he'd almost forgotten existed. Joy. The storm passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming under pale winter sunlight. But the true change had happened inside the house, where 6 children and 2 adults had weathered something far more powerful than wind and rain. Lily didn't stop talking after that night. Her words came slowly at first, 1 or 2 at a time, spoken only to those she trusted most. But they came, and each syllable felt like a miracle. "Hungry," she told Abigail at breakfast. "Pretty," she said to Grace, touching her sister's braided hair. "Ranger," she whispered to Josiah, pointing at the horse through the window. Small words. Ordinary words. But they carried the weight of a child choosing to rejoin the world after months of silent retreat. Dr. Hawkins came to examine her a week later at Abigail's request. She spent an hour with Lily, gentle and patient, then emerged from the examination with something like wonder on her face. "She's healing," the doctor said simply. "I've seen trauma like hers before, and I've seen children who never recovered. But Lily is different. She's found something here that she didn't have before." "What's that?" Abigail asked. "Safety. Real safety, not just the absence of danger." Dr. Hawkins looked at Josiah. "Children know the difference. They can tell when adults are protecting them out of duty versus protecting them out of love. Lily knows she's loved here. That's what's bringing her back." After the doctor left, Josiah stood on the porch watching the children play in the yard. Sam was teaching Will how to rope a fence post. Grace sat on a blanket with Lily and Lottie braiding grass into crowns. Tommy chased chickens with more enthusiasm than success. "You're thinking again," Abigail said, joining him. "Dangerous habit. What about the future?" He turned to face her. "What happens next? Where we go from here? And what conclusions have you reached?" Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, worn at the edges, clearly old. "This was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to Ruth on our wedding day. Said it brought luck to every woman in the family who wore it." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band, thin and delicate. "Ruth wore it until the day she died. I kept it after, couldn't bring myself to sell it or give it away." Abigail's breath caught. "Josiah, I'm not good with words, never have been, but I know what I feel, and I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it." He took her hand, his calloused fingers trembling slightly. "You came into my life when I'd given up on living. You and those 6 children in there. You made me remember what hope feels like. You made me want to fight for something again. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'll stay, not as my housekeeper, not as the woman who takes care of the children. His voice roughened. As my wife, as their mother, as the heart of this family we've built. Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. You mean it. I don't say things I don't mean. You know that by now. I do. She laughed through her tears. I do know that. I know everything about you, Josiah Blackwood. Your stubbornness and your kindness and your fear of letting people in. I know the man you show the world, and the man you hide. And I love all of it. Is that a yes? Yes. She launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him off the porch. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. In the yard, the children had stopped playing to watch. Tommy's voice cut through the moment with characteristic directness. Miss Abby, are you and Mr. Josiah kissing? Abigail pulled back, laughing and crying at the same time. Not yet, but we might be soon. Does that mean you're getting married? Yes, sweetheart, it does. Tommy let out a whoop that startled the chickens into flight. The other children converged on the porch, questions tumbling over each other. Really? You're really getting married? Does that mean you'll be our ma and pa for real? Can I wear my new dress to the wedding? Will there be cake? Josiah held up his hands, overwhelmed by the sudden chaos. One thing at a time. Yes, we're getting married. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Sam pushed through the cluster of smaller children, his young face serious. Mr. Josiah, can I ask you something? Go ahead. After you marry Miss Abby, what happens to us? Sam's voice was careful, guarded. Legally, I mean. Are we still just workers, or... He couldn't finish the question, but Josiah understood what he was asking. The hope buried beneath the caution, the fear of wanting something too much. I've already spoken to Sheriff Hensley, Josiah said, about adoption, all 6 of you if you'll have us. The silence that followed was absolute. You want to adopt us? Grace's voice was barely a whisper. All of us. Every single one. Make it legal and official. Josiah looked at each face in turn. Sam's barely contained hope. Grace's disbelief. Will's grin threatening to split his face. Lottie's tears. Tommy's bouncing excitement, and Lily's quiet smile. You're already family. Papers just make it so the rest of the world has to acknowledge it. Sam's composure cracked. For the first time since Josiah had known him, the boy's walls came down completely. His face crumpled, and he stumbled forward into Josiah's arms. Thank you, he choked out. Thank you. Josiah held him tight, feeling the tremors running through the boy's thin frame. No thanks needed. You earned this. Every one of you earned this just by surviving. The other children piled on, turning the embrace into a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. Even Lily pressed close, her small hand fisted in Josiah's shirt. And standing in the middle of it all, Abigail caught Josiah's eye and smiled through her tears. We're going to be okay, she mouthed. Yeah, he mouthed back. We are. Word of the engagement spread through Cedar Valley like wildfire, carried on the winds of gossip that fueled small-town life. But this time the talk was different. Approving nods instead of suspicious whispers. Congratulations instead of condemnation. The barn raising had changed something in the community. People who'd been content to judge from a distance had seen the truth up close. A man and woman building a family from broken pieces, held together by love and stubbornness, and the kind of courage that couldn't be faked. Even Cornelius Drake's influence had begun to wane. His attempts to turn the town against Josiah had backfired spectacularly after the fire. Everyone knew he was responsible, even if no one could prove it. And everyone knew that the community's response rallying to rebuild what he'd destroyed had been a direct rebuke of everything he stood for. 3 weeks after the proposal, Drake made one final move. Josiah was in town for supplies when he saw the lawyer's office door open and Drake emerge, his face dark with barely contained rage. "Blackwood," Drake's voice carried across the street. "A word." "I've got nothing to say to you." "Then listen." Drake crossed to stand in front of him, close enough that Josiah could smell the whiskey on his breath. "I've filed a petition with the territorial court, challenging your fitness to adopt those children." Josiah's hands clenched. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're an unstable recluse who's taken advantage of a desperate woman and 6 vulnerable orphans. On the grounds that you have no experience raising children and no wife to provide proper female influence." Drake smiled, but it was ugly. "The court date is set for 3 weeks from now. I've hired the best lawyer in the territory. By the time he's done those, children will be in a proper orphanage, and your little frontier fantasy will be over." "You won't win." "I always win, Blackwood. It's just a matter of time and money, and I have plenty of both." Drake leaned closer. "Last chance. Sell me the ranch, take your woman, and disappear. Otherwise, I'll make sure those children end up somewhere you'll never find them." The threat hung in the air, cold and deliberate. Josiah grabbed Drake by the collar and slammed him against the nearest wall. The older man's eyes went wide with shock. "Listen carefully," Josiah said, his voice low and dangerous. "Those children are mine. That woman is going to be my wife. And if you come near any of them, if you so much as look at them wrong, I will end you. Not through lawyers or courts or legal proceedings, through the barrel of a gun. You're threatening me. I'm making a promise, the kind I don't break." Josiah released him, stepping back. "Take your petition and your lawyers and your money and choke on them. We're not going anywhere." He walked away before Drake could respond, his heart pounding, his mind already racing through possibilities. The court battle that followed was the hardest 3 weeks of Josiah's life. Drake's lawyer was good, expensive, and ruthless, with a talent for making reasonable things sound scandalous. He painted Josiah as a disturbed hermit, Abigail as a gold-digging opportunist, the children as pawns in some elaborate scheme. But the defense had something Drake's money couldn't buy: the truth. Sheriff Hensley testified about the legal documentation, the proper procedures, the lack of any evidence of wrongdoing. Dr. Hawkins spoke about Lily's recovery, about the healing she'd witnessed in all 6 children. Mrs. Chen described the family she'd come to know through fittings and friendly visits. Reverend Abbott spoke about faith and redemption and the power of chosen family. And one by one the children themselves took the stand. Sam spoke with quiet dignity about what his life had been before the Blackwoods and what it had become since. Grace described finding safety for the first time in years. Will talked about learning to hope. Lottie spoke about finally feeling wanted. Tommy, in his simple 5-year-old way, said he'd found his forever home. But it was Lily who decided the case. The judge, a stern woman named Sarah Montgomery, who'd heard hundreds of custody disputes, leaned forward when the tiny girl approached the witness chair. "Miss Chen," she said gently, "I understand you've had a difficult time. Can you tell me about where you live now?" Lily looked at the judge with her dark, serious eyes. Then she turned and looked at Josiah and Abigail, sitting in the front row with their hands clasped. "Home," she said clearly. "Mama, Papa, safe." 3 words. The first 3 words she'd spoken to anyone outside the family. Judge Montgomery's face softened. "You feel safe with Mr. Blackwood and Miss Thornton?" "Yes." Lily's voice grew stronger. "They love us, all of us, even me." "What do you mean, even you?" "Because I'm different. Because people say mean things about my face." Lily's small hands twisted in her lap. "But Papa says I'm beautiful. Mama says I belong. They chose us. They keep choosing us. Every day." The courtroom was silent. Drake's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Even Drake himself had gone pale. "Thank you, Lily." Judge Montgomery's voice was thick. "You can step down now." The verdict came 2 hours later. Full custody granted to Josiah Blackwood and Abigail Thornton, pending their marriage. All 6 children legally adopted into the family. Drake's petition dismissed with prejudice and a formal warning issued against any future harassment. Outside the courthouse, the children erupted into celebration. Tommy jumped into Josiah's arms. Lottie and Grace hugged Abigail so hard she nearly fell over. Will and Sam stood back trying to look dignified, but their grins gave them away. And Lily, quiet healing. Lily walked up to Drake, who stood alone on the courthouse steps, and looked him straight in the eye. "You lose," she said clearly. "We win. Go away now." Then she turned her back on him and walked to her family. Josiah had never been prouder of anyone in his life. The wedding took place on a Sunday in early spring, when the snow had finally melted and the first wildflowers were pushing through the thawing earth. The church was full, not just with people from Cedar Valley, but with families from outlying homesteads, farmers and ranchers who'd heard the story and wanted to witness its happy ending. Mrs. Chen had made Abigail's dress simple white cotton, with delicate embroidery that caught the light. The children sat in the front row, scrubbed clean, and dressed in their Sunday best, their faces shining with joy. Reverend Abbott performed the ceremony, his words warm and sincere. "Marriage is not just a contract between two people," he said. "It is a covenant, a promise to stand together through whatever life brings, joy and sorrow, plenty and want." In the case of Josiah and Abigail, that covenant extends to 6 young souls who have already proven that family is not defined by blood, but by love. Josiah barely heard the words. His eyes were fixed on Abigail, on the way she glowed in the spring light, streaming through the windows, on the tears tracking down her cheeks as she spoke her vows. "I promise to love you," she said, her voice steady, despite the emotion. "Not just in the easy moments, but in the hard ones. Not just when you're strong, but when you're weak. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your home, for as long as I live." When it was his turn, Josiah's throat tightened. Words had never been his strength, but looking at her, at the children watching from the front row, he found them anyway. "I spent 4 years believing I had nothing left to give," he said quietly. "That my heart had died along with everyone I loved. But you proved me wrong. You and those 6 children who stumbled into my barn and refused to leave." His voice roughened. "I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of what you've given me. I promise to fight for this family, to protect it, to cherish it. I promise to never stop choosing you, all of you, every single day." "You may kiss the bride," Reverend Abbott said, smiling. Josiah pulled Abigail close and kissed her like the future depended on it. The church erupted in applause. Tommy shouted something about cake, and Lily, sitting between Grace and Sam, spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Family," she said. "Real family. Forever." The celebration afterward was everything a frontier wedding should be: food, music, laughter, and the kind of joy that only comes after long struggle. Josiah found himself surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends by community members who'd chosen to stand with him when standing alone would have been easier. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, Blackwood. Ruth would be proud." "You think so?" "I know so. She always said you had more heart than you let on. Just took the right people to find it." As the afternoon wore on, Josiah stepped away from the crowd to stand on the church porch watching his family. His wife, beautiful in white, laughing at something Mrs. Chen had said. His children, all 6 of them, running through the churchyard with the abandon of kids who finally felt safe enough to play. Sam caught his eye and raised a hand in greeting. The boy was smiling, really smiling, with none of the wariness that had marked his face when they first met. "Papa." Tommy came running, his face smeared with cake. "Papa, can we go home now? I want to show Ranger his new family." "Papa." The word still caught Josiah off guard, even after weeks of hearing it. "Soon," he promised. "Let your mama finish saying goodbye." "Okay." Tommy wrapped his arms around Josiah's leg in a fierce hug. "I love you, Papa. I'm glad you didn't shoot us that first day." Josiah laughed. Actually laughed, a sound he'd almost forgotten he could make. I'm glad too, son. More than you know. Abigail appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. Ready to go home. Yeah. He looked at the children gathering around them, at the life they'd built from ashes and determination. I'm ready. The wagon ride home was quiet, the children tired from celebration dozing against each other in the back. Abigail sat close to Josiah on the bench, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand still clasped in his. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not giving up. On yourself. On us. She lifted her head to look at him. I know how hard it was. How much it cost you to let us in. Worth every bit of it. The ranch appeared on the horizon, building solid against the fading light. The new barn stood proud beside the house, a testament to community and resilience. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth waiting inside. Home. Josiah pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard and turned to wake the children, but Abigail caught his arm. Wait, just one more moment. Let me remember this. So they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, their children sleeping peacefully behind them, their future stretching ahead like an endless prairie. I never thought I'd have this again, Josiah said quietly. After Ruth and the children died, I was certain that was the end of everything good, that I'd used up all the happiness I was allowed. And now I think maybe happiness isn't something you use up. Maybe it's something you build, over and over, no matter how many times it falls apart. He squeezed her hand. You taught me that. We taught each other. Behind them, Tommy stirred. Are we home? Yes, sweetheart, Abigail said. We're home. One by one the children woke and climbed down from the wagon. Sam helped the little ones while Grace carried a sleeping Lily against her shoulder. Will raced ahead to open the door, and Lottie followed with her rag doll clutched tight. Josiah stood in the yard watching them file into the house, their voices rising in the familiar chaos of family life. Papa, Tommy called from the doorway. Come inside. It's cold out there. Papa. 6 months ago the word would have shattered him. Now it filled him with something warm and fierce and unbreakable. Coming, he called back. He took one last look at the sky, at the first stars emerging in the deepening blue. Somewhere up there, he liked to think Ruth and Daniel and baby Sarah were watching, approving, happy that he'd found his way back to living. Thank you, he whispered to them, for everything you gave me and for letting me find it again. Then he turned and walked toward the light spilling from the open door, toward the sounds of children arguing and laughing, toward Abigail's voice calling his name. Toward home, toward family, toward a future he'd finally learned to believe in. And as he crossed the threshold, surrounded by the people who'd saved his life by simply refusing to leave it, Josiah Blackwood understood at last what Ruth had tried to tell him all those years ago. Love wasn't something you could lose by giving it away. It was something that multiplied, that grew stronger with each person you let in, that healed wounds nothing else could touch. He'd spent 4 years building walls against pain. Now he would spend the rest of his life building something far more lasting. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the simple, stubborn refusal to stop believing in second chances. And that was enough. That was everything.